Hi, I'm Mary Lyons, the Wealth Woman.
And I'm Eric Alexander with Acorn Grove.
Welcome to the Wealth and Income Podcast. Today, we are going to do a case study. These are always my favorites because we get to take real life examples of people that we are working with or have worked with, and we get to share with you our thought process, what we did, the conversations we had, the questions that the client had, and then ultimately what we are really proud of, which is the solutions and the results that we were able to drive for our clients. So this one is near and dear to my heart because this was a particularly hard puzzle to solve. And I definitely was like vibrating with excitement when I figured this one out.
Well, and there's so much of that is the hard puzzles are the best puzzles. It's like
Mhm.
you know there's an answer, you know what you're looking for, you know how to win the game, but you don't know how you're going to arrange it all to get there. And so it makes it fun when you finally see it and you're like, oh, that's it. You get the tuning fork in your brain and you're like, that's it. I did it.
Yeah.
So
Well, so there's a phrase that you say all the time, which I have adopted, and it is, I'm powerful, not magical. But
yes,
today I feel
you were
positively
magical.
magical about this particular strategy. So I'm very, very excited to share it with you guys. And this is a strategy specifically for business owners. But I also think this is really relevant for anyone who is expecting an inheritance and has a known inheritance number because it
Yep.
completely changes what can happen during your lifetime. And part of what I was struggling with this is that I like to make all of the decisions and plans based on things I know can happen. And so it took me a while to figure this one out.
Well, and I think it's also like a little bit of a deviation from the process in our brain of how to think through the problems. And
Mhm.
so I love the cases that are really, really hard because it sort of forces us to think outside the box a little more than what we would like. I think we're already thinking outside the box, but even beyond that, of like, well, what if we arranged it this way, or what if we changed the mix a little bit and started thinking outside of what we would normally look at? So it's kind of fun.
Well, and you have
So,
another phrase I like, which is that you reserve the right to get smarter every year. And this
well,
is one of those moments where I feel like I leveled up.
well, and that's the thing is once you've seen it now, it's like you can't unsee it.
Right.
And then it's like, that's actually really brilliant. We should do that all the time. Look what we did. So,
Yeah. Okay, so let us walk you through this particular case. So, this was a client that was referred to me by an existing client, and they are business owners, and they are trying to figure out how they can retire and retire really within the next 12 months. They
yeah.
have recently purchased a home. So, just to give you a little backstory, these people were successful to begin with and good savers to begin with. But in the past couple of years, they've sort of hit a different echelon than what they were in before. So probably low six-figure earners for most of their working adult lifetimes. And then in the past couple of years, their income has popped up to anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million because of what they're doing inside of their business. And so just to give you kind of their demographics, their lifestyle expenses, the income they need in order to maintain their lifestyle is about 310,000 a year. So very, very successful individuals, but they're saving a lot right now.
Yeah.
And there's an age gap between this couple. So he is about 10 years older than she is. And he is definitely approaching that time where he is ready to retire. And what's interesting, I think, about their dynamic is that for a lot of their adult lifetime, he has kind of carried the income side of the equation. And that has flipped on its head based on what she's doing in her business. So I think he's ready to take a break. And by break, I mean, I think he's ready to retire. And she's looking at going, hey, wait a minute. If he's retiring, I want to retire with him and do all of this fun stuff. So when I sat down with them, they had about 1.7 million that is
Yeah.
spread between IRA, 401k, Roth dollars, and brokerage accounts. And they are currently saving a little over 200,000 a year. But that again is a very, very recent thing that they have been able to start doing.
Well, and then the 1.7 that you talked about, like how much they've accumulated to this point, given how old they are and some of the what they've been earning, the fact that they've got that much money and they've only really started like supercharging their savings over the last couple of years means that even in the beginning, when you were talking about how much they were kind of low
Yeah,
six figures, they're saving a crazy amount of money to
correct.
get to that point, that by this standpoint, right? I mean, you can save a lot of money really quickly, but if you save it all in the last 2 years, it doesn't amount for much.
Right.
It helps, but it's not moving the needle
It's real
massively.
money, but it doesn't have the time to compound the way it does if
Correct.
you save it early.
Yeah, at 1.7, that means and earning, low six figures on that side of it, they've been excellent
They've
savers.
been very diligent about what they're doing. They've lived
Yeah,
very conservatively. And honestly, the one luxury item that they have allowed themselves as they have kind of shot up into these higher income levels is they upgraded their house. So they moved into their dream home with enough bedrooms that if the kids want to come, each kid has their own bedroom. And as they begin to get married and have their own families, when they come in for holidays, they each have a place to stay with their families. And that was very, very important to them because, like a lot of our clients, their biggest motivator is that family connection and building those
yeah,
memories and, making sure that as they get older, their kids feel like I can come here and this is home and I have a space. And so I love that because I feel like it's really easy to help people that have such a wholesome desire for what they want to do with the money.
right,
Yeah,
right,
always get excited about that. But so here's the thing. She is running this business and she's been talking to a business broker. And the business broker told her on the very high side that she might be able to get as much as $6 million for the business. But she's had one person kind of like really seriously kick the tires and a second person who's kind of seriously doing their due diligence as well. And the offers that she's looking at are closer to the 3.5 million range, which is
right,
great, but a very different amount than the full 6 million showing up.
right.
And so she kind of looked at that and she said, look, will I be able to maintain over 300,000 of income per year if I have the 1.7 plus whatever I'm able to sell the business for? And so just to kind of give some rough math, because if you're listening for the first time, I think it's important for us to give a little backstory. The sort of safe accepted withdrawal rate in retirement, especially for someone who is retiring in their 50s, the money
Right.
needs to last potentially until they're 100 years old. You
Yeah,
can't
so
afford
40
to,
years.
right? You're really looking at a safe withdrawal rate of about 3%. And so
Yeah,
if you need 300,000 of income and you're at a 3% distribution rate, doing things the conventional or the traditional way, that means you need $10 million before you can retire. And even selling a business for $3.5 million is not getting them anywhere near that $10 million,
correct,
right? So
correct.
I think that's kind of a hard part. So we did kind of a what if you just kept doing what you're already doing strategy. And
Yeah,
so the way that looks is the 1.7 stays invested over the next 12 months while they lock down and finish the sale. And then if the sale grosses, meaning the sales price is 3.5 million, they're going to have to pay taxes out of that. And so, based on a conversation with their CPA, we kind of looked at that as capital gains taxes. And if they end up paying capital gains taxes plus the Medicare surcharge, after they sell the business for 3.5, they're going to net a little over 2.6.
yeah,
So 2.6 plus the 1.7, we end up in a pretty good range, but it's not that $10 million range that they
yeah.
need to.
It's not even half of the 10 million.
Yeah, what do we end up at? I don't
Like,
do math in my head. It hurts my professional
no,
credibility.
that's why I have these fancy 5-digit calculators that I use
Thank goodness.
or 5 function. Yeah, you're like 4.3. So
Okay.
you're really far off on that side of it.
So at a 3% distribution rate, if they manage to save another 200 grand over the course of the next year, and then on top of that, they sell the business. If we look at that 3% withdrawal rate, they actually end up with about 142,000 of
Yeah,
income per year, which is less than half of what they need to maintain their current lifestyle.
yeah. And that's a hard one, especially if you've gone from that, because that's about what they were making before they had the big bump,
Right.
right? And so they get to retire at that point, but they're not retiring at any level of where they are now used to. And that's
Right.
a really, really hard thing, is the used to part of it versus the get to is a very big number. Like it's a downgrading back to 130, I think would feel like a huge loss for them.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Well, they couldn't keep the house, and that
Well,
the
100%.
sort of future and the attachment to the house, that's the one luxury they've really given themselves.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, you know, so here's a little bit of extra backstory that I think we didn't share. So her parents did a great job saving, and they're in their probably low to mid 80s,
Yeah.
and have told her that there will be at least $2 million available for inheritance whenever they pass away. And they're both in really, really good health as of right now. And so we wanted to factor in, okay, if you did inherit $2 million at some point in the next 20 years, how would that change the picture? So, Eric, you did some kind of quick math on what happened if they would inherit the $2 million today, just to see what that looked like. But knowing that they probably won't inherit it today because the parents are both really healthy and still living and all of that, what does that actually do to the plan?
Yeah, I mean, it bumped it up because anytime you get an infusion of $2 million and someone just hands you that money, it makes life better. But whenever we did the math, they're looking at maybe 220
Right.
instead of, so they're going from 140 to 220. So, 80K at that point, which is that's no small leap.
Money.
That is real life money. But if my model is 310, 330, in order to keep the lights and the doors on, it's still pretty far off.
Right.
And that 2 million doesn't show up. I mean, we're assuming because the parents are pretty young still.
Right.
They're
You're
in their
still
early
starting at
80s.
yeah. Yeah, you start at that 142, and then when it shows up, you get to increase what you're doing by about 60 grand.
Right. Which makes Christmas like tenuous.
Oh, right. Yeah. You don't ever want to be in that situation where you're like, I could live my dream life if only. It's just not where you want to go, right?
Let's go on a boat trip, Mom.
Right. So we teach kind of two primary strategies for distribution, and I want to talk about these real quick. So one of them is the simulated pension, which is where at the date you retire, you move some of your funds into an annuity that is an income annuity, and it just pays you out like a pension for the rest of your life. And when you do that, you have to have a permanent life insurance contract that can replace those funds for you whenever the person whose life the annuity is based on graduates from the planet. So we ran the math just based on the current interest rate environment and said, okay, they retired a year from now with all of these funds, not including the inheritance, how much could they spend each year? And the answer was about 244. So just being more efficient with the distribution strategy created more income than a $2 million inheritance. So I already felt really pretty good about efficiency. I mean, that's an extra 100,000 a year from where we started because we introduced more efficiency. So we looked at funding right now, a permanent insurance contract, and then when they sell the business, using some of the proceeds of the sale to finish funding the insurance contract and the rest of it going into this income annuity and creating the simulated pension. So that took us from the 142, which still has exactly the same sale of the business, to just a more efficient spending strategy. But I looked at those numbers and I was like, they're not going to be excited about this because it still doesn't get them to where they can exit the business right now and be on permanent vacation.
Right. Yeah, no doubt.
So I was
and that's the challenge and that's the interesting part of it, especially when you have an age gap between husband and wife. And, a couple of years is not that big a difference, but 10 is significant from a standpoint of the interest rate environment and actuarial science. And so I think especially when you have that age gap on that side of it, trying to come up with sort of parity on income on that is really tough because one person may be at a higher payout rate on those simulated pensions, the annuities, and then the other person is, a couple hundred basis points, so a full 2 or 3% off from that. And that makes a big difference long time. over a long period of time.
For sure it does. And so we had to get very strategic about how we were funding everything. So option 2 for distribution is what we call the market shock absorber or the volatility buffer. We kind of use those two terms interchangeably. So if we say those things, doesn't matter which version of that comes out of our mouth, it means the same thing. And it's the idea that if you have years of after-tax income sitting in the cash value of a permanent life insurance contract, then when the stock market goes down and you lose money in your portfolio, rather than compounding your loss by continuing to take income out of that portfolio, you're just going to stop withdrawing from it. You can't predict it, but you should respond to it. And instead, you're going to take your income from the cash value of this permanent insurance contract, specifically this whole life contract. And so when you do that, you preserve the integrity of your portfolio because it can have a full recovery without you interrupting or crippling that recovery by pulling out the recovery for income. Right. So it just completely changes the solvency of the portfolio, and it dramatically changes how much you can actually spend each year. So this is where I thought the math got really, really interesting because normally when we do this, what are the rules we follow?
Yeah, well, 95% or better. Like we've got to maintain that income until the client's at least 100, if not more. Right. And that's again, with that age gap, that's a really tough problem because you're looking at maybe 40 or 50 years.
Right. That's a long time. So that's where that 3% comes from. And so if you start looking at even like a 35-year time horizon, if you want a better than 90% chance that that money is still producing income, you can't spend more than 3% a year. Regardless of what you're reading on the internet, the actual math is that if you want the money to last for that period of time, it's really about 3%. Because most of what you read that talks about safe withdrawal rates on the internet is not talking about life potential. It's talking about life expectancy, which is really about 20 years less.
Yep.
And so when you factor in, this has to last as long as I do, your only choice is to be overly conservative. So if you do this kind of the traditional way, what we normally recommend is that you have 8 years of after-tax income sitting in your permanent cash value.
Right.
And then you can safely withdraw at 7% from the rest of your portfolio. Right. So 7% withdrawal rate. And then in the bad years, you just stop withdrawing from the portfolio 8 years out of 35, 40 that you can pull income from the cash value of the insurance contract. So I kind of ran that math and I was like, this is not very exciting. It was in that same sort of ratio. But then I remembered, wait a minute, the parents are in their mid 80s and they've already told her what her inheritance number can be. So when I looked at how we funded...
And you used the low end of that number, if I remember that.
I did. Right. And the thing is, when I really started looking at this, I looked at how much money did they have in the cash value of the insurance contracts to begin with. And there was about $1,250,000 sitting in the insurance contract that we did on his life. And there was probably about $450,000 sitting in the insurance contract on hers. Right. So really about $1.7 million that was sitting in these insurance contracts. So, and again, that took like 10 years to build out where it all had to flow through in very specific ways. They receive it, it's invested, and we're essentially taking some of the money to shift it to the insurance contract over a 10-year time period.
Right.
So I looked at the math and I said, what would happen if we run the same simulations that tell us that the number is 7% withdrawals if we have 8 years of buffer? And I said, what if the money doesn't have to last 35 or 45 years? What if the money only has to last until the inheritance comes in, and then we can take that 1.7 and refill the buffer? So we're going to preserve the investment portfolio. And then if we drain that buffer over the next 20 years, what does it look like? And I was actually really kind of shocked when I started looking at this about how aggressive you can be when you're looking at a 20-year time period or less versus looking at 35, 40, 50 years.
Well, and especially with a buffer, because if you, to your point, right, if you just look at the math on the internet, hey, you can do 4 to 6. I think there was even one that said you could do 5 to 6 now. And I'm like, come on, guys, I thought we'd move past this. But the little dirty secret in that is, to your point, they're looking at life expectancy. They're not looking at life potential. And so if you read the fine print, when you go down to that 20-year period, you can actually pull out quite a bit and still be in a good spot. But if you add the buffer to an already shortened time period, it makes it magical,
Right.
like really magical.
So this is what we figured out. If you had 7 years of buffer, you could safely, right? Well, I'm gonna add a caveat here, right? The market does what the market does. So if you look at the likelihood of success over a 35-year time period when you're spending 3% of your starting balance every year,
Right.
the likelihood of success if you are spending 10% of your portfolio and you have 7 years of buffer over a 20-year time period, meaning for 20 years, if the market is just doing terribly, 7 of those years, you have an alternate source of income. So, I mean, that's as conservative can get, right?
Right.
Then you can safely spend about 10%, meaning you have a better or right at 90% chance of success, which is about the same as a 3% withdrawal rate over 35 years. So the reason you can do that is because if you drain that 1.7 and then you have an inheritance that refills that 1.7, you're
Right.
essentially starting your clock over again because you were able to preserve your portfolio during that time period.
Well, and if she retires in her mid 50s and we reset the clock 20 years from now, she's in her mid 70s. She doesn't have a 40 or 50-year time horizon. She's a 25-year time horizon. And so it further compresses the back end as well, which is really cool, which means depending on how the market does now in the next 10, 15, 20 years, maybe it's not even 7 or 8% distribution rate then. It could be higher, it could be closer to that 10 again.
Right.
And so, but you're not filling 1.7, you're refilling it too. Your refill is a bigger refill. And so it's like a raise compounding on another raise, or at least giving yourself the option for it later.
And if the market doesn't do badly, so you haven't drained all 7 years, then when you have the inheritance, instead you just give yourself a raise. So,
or more legacy or more charity or more whatever.
Whatever it is that's important to you, right? And so when I look at this strategy, what it was able to do, and I think this is the coolest part, it got the safe income rate to 310,000 a year.
Yeah.
Which was the number that they needed in order to be able to retire. And so rather than living extremely frugally through the best years of their life and then having this inheritance that doesn't get to do all of the fun things because it's 20 years from now, they have the ability to incorporate that into lifestyle today because they know it's coming at some point in the future. And so they were the things we can actually retire. And we haven't even talked about adding their Social Security into any of these calculations. His Social Security, if he took it like right at age 63, was another $30,000. So that would get him to 340 if they decided to take that right off the bat. Or they could just choose to wait and take it at full Social Security age and give themselves a raise. And then when she takes Social Security, when she's eligible, she can give herself a raise. So it really changed the entire trajectory because they went from, we are working so hard, I'm not sure how long this is sustainable, to if I can find a buyer like below the price range that our business broker told us we could get, then we can absolutely maintain our preferred lifestyle into perpetuity based on the assets that we have. And the beautiful part about this is because of the permanent life insurance contract in place, there's about $3 million that they can pass on to their kids, assuming they cannibalize everything else, which is the goal.
That's huge.
But if it happens, that's sort of the worst case for the next generation.
Well, and the next generation gets a 50% raise over the legacy that they got or they're going to get, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it's being responsible with the money. It's being a good steward. It's leaving more. It's making sure that the next generation is better than what we ourselves received. And I just look at that and I'm like, look, if they did things the conventional way, they'd be at 142. Incorporating these strategies, getting to 310, and then getting to add Social Security on top of that. Like, that's why I said today, I don't just feel powerful. I feel magical.
That is way magical, actually.
Because I got to use like actuarial science. I got to use probabilities. I got to run Monte Carlo simulations. I got to do all the technical work to enable someone else to live their best life. There's nothing more
Well,
fulfilling than that.
yeah, and I think the nerdy part of it for me, watching you do that one, is a long time ago, and it's a very common strategy. Is what I call a bucket strategy. We're going to use burn this bucket down and preserve the next one and preserve the next one, and it's a cool strategy, but it's not very
It's
elegant,
not always the most efficient
and
either.
it's not always the most efficient. And so, what I thought was really kind of neat is you built in this like beautiful marriage of a couple of different systems to make them all work and like use the best part of each system, and like the Venn diagram of financial planning right there with Mary Lyons, right? You were able to sort of build it together and make this really, really elegant model to help them get more and pass on more. Um,
And here's the other thing, because this is how I know this is really good work too. Both of them were financial advisors in a previous life,
oh, nice.
and they have an actuarial science background.
Oh,
So
really? So you
I
buried
had
the
to,
lead. I didn't know that.
oh yeah, I had to prove all of this out for them to see it, believe it, look at the math, all of that, because this is not just, hey, I'm showing this to someone that doesn't understand any of these things and it feels like magic. This is one where I feel like the results are magical, but I had to prove all the science behind it in order for them to feel good
Nice.
about it. Right.
Nice. Like that's double magical today. Well done.
Well, yeah, I'm having a good day.
Well, and the other part of it that I thought was really cool in that story, and I know we're coming up on time, is most business owners are holding out for the big paycheck. I think I
Right.
can build it a little bit bigger. I think I need to build it a little bit bigger because I need the 10 million or I need the whatever. And they either miss out on time with their family they could have had, or
Right.
they miss a window in the market where, nope, 3.5 or 6, that's all you're going to get. And then the other side of this is it's a different story. The market changed, the business changes or
Well,
whatever.
that's what happened to my grandfather. He was
Right.
in the process of building a steel manufacturing business bigger, and then the whole industry collapsed in the United States, and there was nothing to sell anymore.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
it's
it's
real.
and it's we're holding out for the bigger thing. I think I can. I think I can. Right. The little engine that could. I love that story, but I think sometimes it's like maybe the little engine is just good enough right now. But like if we built the engine so that we didn't need it to be massive, then they get
Right.
to exit sooner and in a better spot.
Well, and you ran the math on what they would have to sell the business for in order to do things the conventional way and end up with that same 310. And what was the number?
Yeah, we had to go from 3.5 to almost 9 million on the
Right.
exit. So 3x multiple on what it's currently valued at.
Right. So $9 million instead of 3.5 to get to the same income. And this is where, like, I feel like we need a megaphone so that we can amplify our voices, because
Right.
how many people end up selling a business and then living a smaller life than they need to because they haven't heard of these strategies or they didn't know where to look for them? Because
Right.
I think about the things that we're talking about, and even though I've used words like magical today, one of the resources that we give out when clients are saying, how do I know this is real? Is a series of white papers. But then
Right.
there is also an article that was published like 2 years ago by Ernst & Young talking about the impact of permanent life insurance and income annuities on an overall solvency and income from any given portfolio. And their research is conclusive that these strategies are extremely impactful for increasing what you can enjoy during your lifetime and increasing the likelihood that you never run out of money. So it's not just two random podcasters, right? There is evidence that has been put together and packaged by large reputable institutions that talks about these particular strategies. So if you would actually like a copy of any of those white papers,
Yeah.
or you like to read the Ernst & Young report that came out, we would be more than happy to send those to you. So Eric, if they would like a copy of that, where can they get a hold of you? Where can they find you?
You can find me at Economics with Eric, wherever you social media. What about you, Mary?
You can find me at The Wealth Woman wherever you use social media. Just shoot me a DM, ask for some of those resources, and we will get them right over to you. I hope you guys enjoyed listening today. I know this is one of the more exciting solves I've gotten to do in a while, and I just appreciate you being here and letting us share what we're doing with you.
Thanks, guys.
Specific financial concepts and advanced strategies are presented to you for educational purposes only. We cannot and do not guarantee their applicability to your individual circumstance. We encourage you to seek personalized advice from qualified professionals on all financial matters.
Provided content is for overview and is not intended and should not be relied upon as individualized tax, legal, fiduciary, or investment advice. Neither Wealth Woman, Acorn Grove, or the Wealth and Income Podcast, nor their representatives provide tax or legal advice. For answers to specific questions and before making any decision, please consult a qualified attorney or tax advisors.
All numeric examples and any individual shown are hypothetical and were used for explanatory purposes only. Actual results may vary.
Investing involves risk, which includes potential loss of principal. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Guarantees are subject to the claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company.
Life insurance should be purchased by individuals that have a need to provide a death benefit to protect others with insurable interest in their lives against financial loss. Life insurance is not a retirement plan, investment, or savings account.
Not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or any governmental agency. Insurance and investment products, not a deposit, not FDIC or NCUA insured, not insured by any federal government agency, not guaranteed by any bank or credit union, may lose value.
Please visit the Wealth Woman website disclosure page for other important disclosures.